Hello everybody and welcome back to my YouTube channel. This film is rated M for mature themes, sexual references, drug use, and coarse language. Being favoured to win the Best Actor Oscar this year, Brendan Fraser has made a big comeback in his career with this performance. This is director Darren Aronofsky's 8th feature film, and this was my second most anticipated film of 2023, so this is Kier's Reviews, and this is my review of The Whale.
Where she cares about people, and other people care about her. And she's gonna be okay.
I need to go.
Mary, she doesn't
I have to go.
have anyone else. I need to know that I have done one thing right with my life.
The first thing I advise when watching The Whale is that you don't buy any popcorn for the movie, as there are very few moments where it's appropriate or loud enough to actually sneak any popcorn into your mouth. Secondly, bring tissues, because this is one of the most emotionally visceral films of recent memory. The Whale may not be a masterpiece, but it evokes the emotions, reactions, and connections from the film to the audience that it needs to. Brendan Fraser's performance demonstrates his character's deep and sometimes self-destructive descent into complete emotional tragedy, as the film examines the themes of abandonment, love, and mortality within its entirely focused story that is masterfully directed by Darren Aronofsky. Given that this is Aronofsky's 8th feature film and it's been over 5 years since his last movie Mother, he packs such a punch with this movie, not just with Fraser, but with the story and the layers it evolves, as well as the unknowing captivity that audiences will have with this story, and it's honestly surprising just how resonant this movie became as it progressed. It's a very moving experience in all aspects. Brendan Fraser's performance is undeniably my favourite pick for the Best Actor award at the Oscars this year, because he has understood his character Charlie and professionally taken such an insight into the pain and hurt that this character takes a journey on. From the first scene, you instantly feel a sense of discomfort, and that's only the first part of the journey that The Whale takes you on, because Fraser's performance grows from uncomfortable to a genuine feeling of love and sympathy. As more is uncovered about Charlie, you get an insight into his innocence at this time of his life, even when it seems that the world is against him because of his past, which comes from a place of twisted spirituality, repressed sexuality, devastating grief, and a torturous shame. Given that Charlie's obesity is such a driving factor of so many parts of this film, his shame is what overpowers every character around him, and even though that may only be 4 or 5 people, his shame is self-deprecating to the point where it frustrates anyone that interacts with him. To be so ashamed of his weight and be reduced to repeatedly saying the words "I'm sorry" as a natural response is heartbreaking. It's phrases like the repeated "I'm sorry" that made me so personally attached to Charlie in some ways, because I went through a phase for a long time where all I'd say is "I'm sorry" to anyone around me. I understand the burden that Charlie feels about himself and how he would see himself as an inconvenience constantly, because he could never do anything without help from somebody else. There's a lot in The Whale that I personally responded to because it's so accessible as a concept or a theme, as it doesn't have to be literally the same situation that Charlie is in order to relate to it. That's where the connection grows, because he shapes his mind around contradicting ideologies with how his view about people in general grows throughout the movie, but then only focuses on himself as the disgusting and ugly parts of the world, hence where his shame originates. He's formed such a detrimental figure of himself in his mind that he can't ever fully form any true or honest relationships with those that mean the most to him, specifically because he feels that he has to owe them something in return, whether it be financial aid or emotional support. The prosthetics that are used on Brendan is excellently done, because Aronofsky works in some of the genres from his other films in order to portray a feeling of horror when you see all of the prosthetics that demonstrate how overweight Charlie really is. It may not be a fearful type of horror, but there's a certain subtle offense that you feel when you see him almost completely naked. However, as you get to know Charlie so intimately, not sexually, but emotionally, your comfortability grows so much more as you become more acquainted with the goodness within the character. Once you discover his morals and outlook on life, everything changes for the viewer, and since this is mainly in the second half, it's distinctly where the story begins to emotionally drain you. Since this is more of a character study drama than an ensemble cast type of movie, everything feels so condensed and restrictive. The locations never actually leave the one central location of Charlie's house, and don't go anywhere past his front porch at any point in the movie. Brendan's performance is bound to stay with you long after the film finishes, because he has such a profound impact on anyone that watches The Whale. Sadie Sink was fantastic, even though she was a very infrequent character throughout the movie. However, she had enough scenes spread during the film that made her feel like she was a constant presence, and in a way, I thought that the way she was written into this story was very smart, because it's all from Charlie's perspective with how often people come in and out of his life. Despite the film taking place over less than a week, this idea is supported through the characters' appearances. Sadie's performance was what intrigued me the most in the end with The Whale, because I could never figure out what her motivations honestly were. She was such a complicated, difficult, and inaccessible character that never seemed to have clear intentions, making her a puzzle for the audience. I love trying to figure out that puzzle because she gives so much but so little at the same time. The deep-seated issues that she has may come out randomly in bursts in certain scenes, but the movie never focuses purely on her without it having some kind of connection or relation back to Charlie and his problems. Sadie was brilliant in this role. What I felt was really impactful was recognising the experience The Whale had for a big audience in a cinema. Seeing it with a nearly sold out cinema full of people was particularly interesting for me. Since the movie ends on a very heartbreaking and gut-wrenching note with such an abrupt conclusion, there's no chance for you to gather your thoughts or process what you've just watched for the last 2 hours because you're drowning in tears. Well, I definitely was at least. However, what resonated with me the most was after it ended as the credits were rolling. No one moved from their seat to leave once it concluded, and no one made a sound. The silence after the film was felt by anyone in that cinema, and I haven't had an experience with a big audience like that and them all being so silent since I saw A Beautiful Day in the Neighborhood back at the start of 2020. When the entire cinema reacts like that and takes their time to process what they've just witnessed in complete utter silence, is incredible, and proves why the cinema experience outweighs any other way of watching a movie. The Whale single-handedly proved that streaming doesn't convey the same experience that a cinema does.
You can just be angry at me.
Okay, you know what? You can't throw me away like I'm a piece of garbage and then suddenly just want to be my dad 8 years later. You left me for your boyfriend. It's that simple. And if you've been telling yourself anything different, then you're lying to yourself.
The themes that are so prominent and featured in the foreground so often are the topics of mortality, abandonment, love, and the conflicts that come with the ideas and practices of spirituality. The way this movie deals with mortality is haunting because it casts such a shadow over the entire tone of the story, and it gets to a point where your heart rate becomes so fast, like mine, that you start to truly worry for Charlie at some points. There's a scene where he eats way too much food, and it's this scene that proves that he's thought about his own mortality and that he's considered all of the different avenues that comes with either accepting death or willing to fight on. But because the main theme of the movie is mortality, it's usually dealing with ideas like suicide, depression, and the feeling of being disposable. These aren't spoilers, I promise. I don't like spoiling movies for people, and I don't like people that spoil movies for others, but the concepts and story arcs that focus on abandonment are so brilliantly presented by the presence of Sadie Sink's character and how she forms her interactions with Charlie, and it's truly amazing watching her perform with Brendan Fraser, as they instantly had such a strong chemistry between them that it was seamless to see them as an estranged father and daughter. I won't discuss too much about the concepts of spirituality as it always ties into spoilers, so in order to avoid spoiling anything, I'll leave my thoughts on that alone. My only issues with The Whale was its pacing, and while I was never taken out of the experience, the first half notably takes its time to get to the core focus of the plot. The dialogue and character development is certainly what holds up everything in the first half to keep it from being a bore, and the subtle twists that aren't overly shocking but are more upsetting also convey an attachment between the movie and the audience. The second half is what really brings the fascination and praise to the screen. It emotionally destroys you at nearly every turn as ideas are finally settled, and while Brendan Fraser's performance continues to tear you apart, you always understand why certain choices in the story were made, as well as gradually accepting where the next plot point is going to lead to. For the entire final 10 minutes of the film, I was sobbing my face off to the point where every prediction I had in my head made me reflect even more on the conclusion of The Whale, but also my own troubles that I could relate to within the film. That only made me cry so much harder. There's a few minor sequences about a bird that always perches on Charlie's window because he leaves out a plate of food for the bird to come and eat, which truly highlights how lonely Charlie is. The bird only seems to appear thematically whenever an emotional plot point is concluded or if it's just begun. There's an appearance by the bird when Sadie Sink has an argument with Brendan, but then the bird is there when Charlie feels alone. He hides from the outside world and even from the students in his class that he teaches online, not only because of his obesity, but because he's also obscuring his own honesty with his class and anybody that approaches him, from the pizza delivery man to his own students. The obscurity of honesty in The Whale is highlighted multiple times and is where the emotional gravity comes from in the second half. Discovering exactly what is honest about every character's life, whether it be a personal revelation or their judgment of the people in the outside world, is what brings out the tears in its final minutes. There's also some scenes in which Sadie's character reads out an essay about Moby Dick and how some of the chapters in that novel contain seemingly nothing but descriptions of whales. Whenever that essay is read out from anybody in the movie, it increases in its resonance because it has more emotion tied to it every time it's read. The impact of the analysis of nothingness in the essay also relates back to how alone and worthless Charlie feels about himself, and while that idea isn't fully fleshed out and is more of a vague idea that the audience figures out for themselves, the way it's read each time gives the essay a new meaning since more has been uncovered about each character's life, or there has been more development in the current plot that we're watching with The Whale, and as the essay comes to its conclusion, it has a certain fire to it that either aggravates, upsets, or destroys one of its characters, whether it be from Sadie or Brendan or anyone else. The underlying layers and themes of The Whale is what makes it such an important and emotionally draining movie, because there's so much happening, most of it happening without people noticing.
Do you ever get the feeling that people are incapable of not caring? People are amazing.
The Whale is certainly one of the most emotional movies I've seen in recent memory, and it evokes such a reaction from audiences that it genuinely takes a long time to process. Due to its accessibility and its themes, concepts, and development, it becomes an incredibly thought-provoking film that gives such a perplexing look at characters that have such hidden and deep-seated issues that have to be worked out at some point during the story. Brendan Fraser's performance is outstanding and perfectly moving, so much so that I think he deserves to win Best Actor at the Oscars this year. Sadie Sink works so well opposite Brendan too, as such an opposing force as well as being the complete opposite type of character to Brendan's. The prosthetics used on Fraser is magnificent and truly believable, and The Whale is a movie that will stay with you long after you finish watching it, as it holds such a deep and emotional impact that it won't leave your mind easily. Aronofsky once again delivers a devastating yet everlasting project, so I'm giving The Whale an 8 out of 10. Thank you all so much for watching. Are you going to see The Whale? Let me know below. As always, be sure to have a look at my previous reviews of Tar and Babylon. Be sure to subscribe to my channel and follow me on Letterboxd and Instagram for all of my latest movie reviews. This has been Kia's Reviews, signing off for now.
Don't forget to like, follow, and obey.